Welcome to Every Step Podcast. I'm Krystyna, Weston.
And I'm Judith Beck.
Every Step is the podcast where career and life meet.
Hey, Krystyna, how are you going today?
Hey, Judith.
Well, how many times over the years have we self-sabotaged ourselves? I can't even count the number. And that's what our subject's about today. And for those of you that are listening, the audience, to give you a clear definition of what self-sabotaging behavior is, it often stems from low self-esteem, it's negative self-talk, and related to negative emotions, which are continually reinforced by the resulting failure. And, you know, it's probably, to me, my view is self-sabotage stems mainly from fear of not being able to complete what I think, or my lack of confidence.
I think a lot of it's subconscious, Judith, and it'll be really good to explore this in a bit more detail, in particular when we bring in our little special guest who's waiting in the wings. I don't know that for many of us, I don't know that it's actually we're fully aware of what we're doing. It might be a story that we have, or it might be just this embedded sense of I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve it, because I don't know that people willingly go in and say, you know, I'm launching this business and I want it to be an enormous success. And then we don't do a business plan around, well, I'm going to hire the wrong people and I'm going to leave everything to the last minute and I'm not going to have a project plan. And I'm like, but people do those stupid things. But I don't know that they set out with a project plan to do those stupid things. So there's something going on in our subconscious or our psyche that says we either don't deserve it, or I'm going to do everything, but I'm going to trip at the last minute. So there's something a bit more complex going on. Where have you self-sabotaged yourself, Judith? Where have you done it?
Oh God, I know, even when I finally got around to writing my book, I thought about it for years and years and years. I knew exactly what I wanted to write, how I was going to do it, kept stuff in the wings, but oh no, I can't because I've got this, I can't because I've got that, or because I had this self-doubt in my mind about whether or not, one, I was a good writer, and two, would anybody publish it? And then, will anybody buy it?
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of like I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough, or I'm not deserving, or it doesn't happen to people like me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the reality is COVID is what pushed me, because then it was mainly I had to get buckled down, and that's what I had. No more excuses, just do it. But even through the process, you have a lot of self-doubt, and one day you might procrastinate, and then, you know, you've got to go forward. I mean, I think the key to a lot of people who are self-sabotaging, it's so crucial, and we've talked about this a lot of times, is having people in your corner who are pushing you out of that self-sabotaging behavior.
And we talk about that a lot, don't we, Judith? You really need someone to say, come on, you can do it. Like, you're good enough. That's awesome. You're amazing. You can do this.
And it really does stem down, I think, from when you're young. It's so important for kids to be given that ability to fail so they can learn.
Absolutely. And we talk about this a lot, don't we? Resilience.
I hate to admit this, but I'm going to. So I've been watching Maths, Married at First Sight in Australia, for research purposes.
Oh, yeah, of course. Just research.
Okay, yes. Research purposes only. And what I notice with all those young people, and the boys and the girls, they're all in their sort of late 20s and 30s. They're so insecure about everything. And, you know, like, everybody has anxiety. Every single person has anxiety, and they're all worried about failure and about everything. And it's like, oh my God, you're in the prime of your life. this is when things are good.
Yeah, I blame social media. I blame
Oh,
social media.
100%. Social media is doing a lot of damage. But even from that point of view, not having that confidence to just go and do things and being so, I mean, we were probably insecure. I'm sure we were in our 20s and 30s, certain things, but not to the point of being paralyzed.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit of that.
There's a paralyzation on that. So that is, and really thinking, oh, I can't, like this one girl, she couldn't even, she didn't want to, she doesn't want to be in social gatherings because she's too, the anxiety gets to her because she thinks everybody else is around her is more confident than her. And
that's a form of
they're not.
self-sabotage, right? The thing that she most wants is intimacy and connection and friendships. But then she either puts herself in scenarios or does things in those scenarios that blow things up.
Exactly.
And I've seen that happen in my own social circles where people want something so badly, but their behaviors are the complete opposite of achieving the outcome that they most want.
Exactly. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, I used to interview executives for years and years and years, and I was always shocked that people at general manager level would be self-sabotaging. They'd get to a certain point and they'd get on the short list, and then all of a sudden the chatter in their head will
imposter syndrome. I can't possibly be CEO.
Yeah, I'm not good enough to go into this. Well, and I'd be like, well, if not you, who? And so, it's kind of like, of course, you're here because you're good. So let them decide whether or not you're good enough. But if they offer you the job, they obviously think you're good enough. But they would be sort of in that position where they wouldn't know if they should accept the offer because that fear, and I don't know if I can do it. And then they start making excuses.
Oh, that's the ultimate self-sabotage. You've actually been given an offer and then you...
And that's why people in your corner need to be through. But we are going to
I think we need an expert in the room,
I think we need an expert to talk to us. And that's why we have Antonio Garrido here today. And Antonio is an executive coach. He's a speaker and he's author of My Daily Leadership. And he also is an opinion columnist for CEO World. He currently is in the UK, but he lives in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and he's joining us today. And before I welcome you, Antonio, I just want to mention your survey that's currently out on LinkedIn right now, which asks, what do you think is the number one way leaders sabotage themselves? And so far, the poll still has time to go, so I encourage it, if anybody listening, to go and have a look at it. Overthinking, 56%, perfectionism, 24%, self-entitlement, 20%. So I would totally agree with that.
Thinking's not acting. Thinking's not acting. Acting's where the action is, right? And thinking's not acting.
So welcome, Antonio.
Hello. Gosh, you covered so much ground in those last few minutes. Dribbling away furiously. I will be staggered if we cover all of those things, but there's a lot of stuff to talk about. But thank you ever so much for the invitation. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so I do appreciate it. Thank you.
So what do you think is the number one? What do you think? What have you seen? What have you seen?
Where to begin? Well, let's work our way around to that. Perhaps let's cover a few of those bases that you mentioned, and I think you did do a really good job, I think, of covering some of the bigger points. So in no particular order of priority, let's try and break some of these things down, right? In the same way that we say to our clients, our leaders, and so on, look, nobody, I mean, okay, some, but very, very, very few, right? Most well-adjusted, well-socialized, not psychopathic or sociopathic individuals, they come to work to do a good job. Nobody drives to work thinking, oh, I'll do this today, this will really screw them up, right? So nobody comes to work to do a good job. Just largely they want to get through the day unscathed, have some nice conversations, do their work, and go home safely. And in the same way, no leader wants to come to work and think, I want to do a bad job today, right? I know I shall do this because this will screw them up. So in other words, that never happens. So largely people are making the decisions that they make, they think, for entirely rational and sensible reasons. That's our first issue, which is an issue of confirmation bias, right? Kind of right bias. We kind of think that we make really sensible decisions and we make the right decisions at the time, and we make the decisions all for the best and all for the good, but we don't. So let's start by talking about blind spots. Let's start there. I did a talk for about 400 leaders just before COVID hit, actually, or before COVID hit Miami at any rate. I've probably been in Wuhan for a few weeks, but anyway, just before it hit Miami, I did a talk for a few hundred leaders, and I asked them. I said, "Okay, by a show of hands, who here in the audience?" And this was leaders of every flavor, right? Large organizations, small organizations, every kind of industry. So this isn't sector specific or size specific, right? So really good cross section of solo entrepreneurs right the way through to leaders of Fortune 50 companies. And I said, okay, who here by a show of hands has no leadership blind spots? And thankfully, there was a very self-aware bunch, or self-aware at least to the extent that nobody put their hands up. So I thought, okay, that's a good start. So everybody recognized, at least peripherally or at the superficial level that, yeah, they probably do have blind spots because they looked around and no one else put their hands up. So they thought, okay, well, we'll have to play the game. So then I asked them, okay, great. So everybody here recognizes that they do have some blind spots. If everybody could then just do me an enormous favor and just write down for each of you what your own particular blind spots are, that would be great.
But they're blind.
Now, what's that? Sorry?
The spots are blind. Like, we don't know what they are because they're in our blind spot.
That's exactly the point. If they knew what they were, then they wouldn't be blind spots in QED. And so the thing about blind spots is we all have them, but we don't know what they are. And if we don't know what they are, how on earth can we go about fixing them? Where for some people, as you say, it may be imposter syndrome. For some people, it could be this whole confirmation bias. For some people, it's this fear of being judged. And I shall come to that later. Because that's a very, very important one. So largely at the root of all of these is ego, actually, surprisingly enough, or maybe not. Freud was right. And one of you, I can't remember which one it was, because you were talking at such a rate, said that, some of this is childhood scripting, right? From, you pick this up from the schoolyard, which is absolutely true. And as Woody Allen once said, if it's not one thing, it's your mother, right? And he's right? Because we picked this up.
Oh, your father. Yeah.
Yeah. So we picked these issues up largely when we were 6, 7, or 8 years old, which is hard to believe now because the rational part of your audience's minds are going, yeah, but I don't think so. So give me a minute and let's try and unpick it, right? So let's start with, so we all know we have blind spots and we don't know what they are. And here's the other problem. And I've worked for for small organizations and very large organizations. What you'd call a Fortune 60 company with thousands of employees and billions in revenue, right? And I worked for small companies when I first came out of university. 1 million years ago, and more by luck than by judgment, ended up kind of progressing up that whole corporate ladder. And nobody ever came to me and knocked on my door and said, hey, Antonio, do you have a minute? Of course, I would have said, yes, come in, sit down, what's on your mind? And nobody ever came up to me and said, hey, well, listen, boss, I've been watching your performance over the last 6 months or so, and I just thought I ought to tell you that I think you're dreadful in every particular regard. I think you're terrible at this and awful at that, singularly stinky at this. Like nobody ever comes and tells you that, right? I loved a conversation that I saw with President Bush Senior, when he was no longer the president, but in America they still called ex-presidents Mr. President for some bizarre reason. But anyway, there you are. And he was just in a pro-am golf tournament and he just walked off the 18th green. And somebody shoved a camera in his face and said, "Hey, Mr. President, how was the golf?" And President Bush, or ex-President Bush, stopped and thought for a second. And he said, "It's amazing how many games of golf he's lost since leaving the White House," right? And so if you think about whilst ever he was the president, he thought he was the blooming best golfer on the planet because everybody let him win because he was the president. It's hard to tell someone they have an ugly baby, after all. So, one of the first questions, back to the point, I am rather circuitous in my conversations. So for your audience, any of those that are in a management, senior management, leadership position, think about this as a question. So as I ask this question, give it a thought and write a number down, and you too can do the same. Just for giggles. So what percentage? So here's the question: what percentage of the time do you think your people tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? What percentage of the time do you think your people tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Well, that's an interesting question. Let's agree that it's not 100%. Neither is it zero. So, I mean, let's just get things into perspective. But the fact of the matter is, this is my third book. When I wrote my second book, I spent some time, I wanted to talk to some agents of the FBI, because that's their job is to get to the truth, right? They're pretty good. Well, that's what they get paid to do at any rate, to get to the truth. And I was talking to a friend of mine in Miami, and I said, "How do I get to speak to the FBI?" He said, "Oh, it's really easy. Just walk into any bank with a sawn-off shotgun and it'll appear pretty quick." So anyway, a couple of FBIs, and we were FBI agents, and we were talking about about the truth and how do you get to the truth. And sometimes when people tell you something that they believe is the truth, is it the truth? And there's a whole thing about truth. But every leader needs to have a strategy for truth, and they need to have a strategy for trust. So think about what percentage of the time do you hear the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? What's your strategy for trust, and what's your strategy for truth? Anyway, what the FBI chap said to me, and I think is interesting, is people will always tell you a version of the truth that they think it's in their best interest to have you believe. So people will tell you a version of the truth that they think it's in their best interest to have you believe, whilst ever you're the leader or in position of authority and power over them. So anyway, what's the point of all of that? The point of all of that is you've got to figure it out, because no one's going to tell you, because you're the CEO, because you're the leader, and nobody comes and says, "I think you're doing a singularly dreadful job." Okay, so we know we've got blind spots. We don't know what they are. No one's going to tell us. So how are we going to figure it out? Okay, well, it relies on us developing something which is in dreadfully short supply, unfortunately.
Self-awareness.
Exactly. We have to build self-awareness. And self-awareness is a tricky thing. When we teach our clients, right? So you have a responsibility to develop yourself, your people, and therefore your organization. You have to future-proof yourself, your people, your organization. Terrific. They all buy that. They go, "Yeah, great, love it." So then we say, well, okay. And the thing about self-awareness is everybody thinks they've got it. There was a great report. We talk about it in the third book, the one that we're talking about, the My Daily Leadership book. People were asked, "Do you think you're an above?" I mean, everybody thinks they're a good driver, but they were asked, "Do you think you're an above average driver?" And if you think about it, 50% should say yes and 50% should say no. That's how the averages work, right? So do you think you're above average driver? About 95% of people said that they were an above average driver, but that doesn't work, does it? The maths, the logic, the logistics of that don't work. So self-awareness is pretty low, right? Not just in driving, but all over the place. We tend to think we're a little bit more windswept and interesting than we really are. We tend to think we're much more amusing than we really are. Some people have a very deflated view of themselves. And so there's that as well, right? But here's the thing. When we say to our leaders, listen, you have to develop yourself. We'll talk about that in a second, self-awareness and all of these blind spots and all of that kind of stuff. You have to develop your people and you have to develop your business. And one of the ways that you develop your people is by coaching them. Okay, so let's talk about coaching and self-coaching. If I were to say to you, Krystyna, just imagine, let's just imagine in some kind of parallel universe that you worked for me, right? And I were to say to you, hey, listen, we're going to have a coaching conversation every Wednesday at 3, for the sake of argument, for an hour. What should we talk about? You're likely to say something, because I've asked you whether we're going to have some coaching. So you're likely to say something that isn't going to take you too far outside of your comfort zone. You're not going to really volunteer the thing that you find the most difficult to talk about, are you? I mean, that's like asking the turkeys to vote for Thanksgiving. They tend to not want to do that. So when we ask people, what do you need coaching on? They'll say something and then the leader thinks, oh, great, we've got something to work on here. But the reality is, it's not the thing that's going to help them most, because again, for purposes of ego, they're going to say something that doesn't stretch them too far outside their comfort zone. Because anything that stretches them too far outside their comfort zone is going to be uncomfortable to them, right? But we all know there's no growth in your comfort zone and there's no comfort in your growth zone. So we know that anything that's going to have any real value to us or for us is going to be something that we actually don't want to discuss, because it's a difficult thing, because it's a self-limiting belief, or because it's something that's holding us back, or something that's, difficult for us to deal with. Okay, so there's a lot of dynamics, right, at play, holding us back, whether through experiences, or whether through peer pressure, whether through fear of failure, and all of those kind of things. Okay, and to confound everything, just to kind of put a bow on this, and then we'll talk about some specifics. Let's think about beliefs for a second. So, where do our beliefs come from? Are they stamped on our DNA, right? That's just something that. Did they come from outer space? Where do they come from? What do you think? Let's ask Judith. Judith,
our beliefs, I think, start right from the moment we start learning. Our beliefs and our environment. So a combination of home learning, the school we went to, the friends circle that we're in, the influencers during those formative years.
Good. So they're learned.
And things that happen to us. I think we're meaning-making machines, and we put meaning to things that as adults we would go, oh, that's nothing. But it might be something as little as, you're 4, 5, 6 years old, you're having a birthday party, and only a fraction of the guests turn up that you thought were going to turn up, and you make up a story that nobody loves you and that you're not good at making friends. And then you take that with you through life.
Exactly. I remember this one time when I was a kid, those, I don't know what they call them, those round things that you get on and they spin them around and you hold on to them as you go around.
Oh,
like carousels, I think they were called. Anyway, I can remember being on that carousel, going around there, spinning around and flying off and, like rolling in the dirt and scraping my knees. And I remember my dad saying, "You're okay, get on there and try it again." Now, today, somebody would have said, where's the where's the park ranger? We need to get that carousel out of the park because it's dangerous for
Yeah,
little.
shut it down, shut it down.
Down.
Health and safety, police tape, cones. Right. So
Helmets. They'd make us put helmets on.
yeah, exactly. But anyway, the point is, you're both right. So beliefs are learned. They're not just stamped on our DNA, right? We're born blank slates and we learn our beliefs. Now, what is a belief? Well, a belief is something that we hold to be true. It isn't necessarily true. It's just something that we hold to be true. And Mark Twain said the things that really get you in trouble in this world, and this is the key point, the things that really get you in trouble are the things that you absolutely know are true, which just ain't, right? To use Mark Twain's language, right? The things that we know to be true, which just ain't, but we know them to be true, but we're not accepting that they're not. So let's talk about beliefs for a second and back to this principle of confirmation bias. So I have to just quickly tell you about the first big experiment that was done on confirmation bias. I don't know whether this is going to translate across to Australia, I confess, but I'm hoping this is going to work. Do you know what there used to be a retail chain called Woolworths. Did that ever get to Australia?
Yeah, we've got our own Woolworths. Whether it's the same Woolworths, we've got a wool chain called Woolworths.
The CEO just resigned.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, when I say Woolworths to people, I typically get very blank looks. Certainly in America, this is right. And certainly people of a certain age. And when somebody goes, oh, yeah, I know Woolworths, instantly they're on my Christmas card list forever because, you know, I feel like such a dinosaur when I'm talking about it. But anyway, in the late 60s, early 70s, they did one of those big, I think it was Harvard, it may have been Princeton anyway, they did one of those huge social survey experiments, and they went into Woolworths, I guess Walmart now, and they bought hundreds and hundreds of pairs of white socks. Do you know this story?
No.
Okay, so they got these white socks, right? Pairs of white socks, and they split them, right, in two. And they nailed one sock on the left of this piece of board, and they nailed another sock on the right of this piece of board. They drew a line down the middle, and they said, and they put a note, a label over the left-hand sock, and the label over the left-hand sock said something almost exactly like washed in premium Tide liquid detergent. And then on the right, over the right-hand sock, it said, there was a label that said washed in own brand budget powder. Right? Something like that, right? And they took hundreds of these boards out into the streets. And they stopped people at random, and they held up these boards and they said, you got a second? Which sock? Now remember, these are pairs of socks, right? That we just split. Which sock is the whitest, right?
Oh, the premium one, definitely.
Right. So we imagine, right? We imagine that everybody goes, oh, the sock on the left, that's whiter than the one on the right. Okay. So good. So correct so far. So far, correct. So then they said, why? What makes you say that? And they say, oh, it's you can tell it's a white. It's like a bluey white. It's like an incandescently fluorescent white. Oh yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. And they're describing how the one on the left is whiter than the one on the right. Terrific. Then, okay, so think about this for a second. Then they said, well, actually, what would you say if we told you that just this morning we went into Woolworths and bought these socks, pair of white socks, split them, nailed them to the board, and just stuck that label above each one? No, okay. So what would the three of us, or not me because I know it, but you two, what do you imagine you would like people to now say? What would you hope that people would now say, knowing this new piece of information. What would you like people to say at that point? What do you think?
Admit that they were like sucked in.
Sucked in. I think probably they would have gone, no, that's not true. That can't be true. You're lying.
Would like people to say, oh, silly me, what a fool I've been, right? That's what we
They're
would
not
like.
going, and people don't.
No, they don't. What they then did, right, which was staggering, they then blamed the researchers. They said, like, and I don't mean one or two. I'm talking like significant percentage, like 90 odd percent. They blamed the researchers, saying, well, it must have been how you were holding the board. You must have been holding the board wrong. Or some people said, oh, well, when I looked at the one on the left, maybe the sun was shining. And then when I looked at the one on the right, the clouds must have come across this, right? And they are now changing the laws of physics such that it confirms their belief, which they have held now for maybe 8 seconds, right? They've had this belief that the one on the left, we're not talking years and years of a belief, we're talking seconds of a belief. We would expect everybody to go, oh, I'm such a fool. But back to ego, back to bruised ego, back to not being able to do that, right? And they blame the world. They change the laws of physics such that it confirms their previously held belief, which they have had for 8 seconds. So there's a lot going on.
So why do we get so attached? What is it that causes us to get so attached to a belief? And we know people that in our families and in our lives where we can't have rational conversations with them because they're so fixed and so stuck.
I'm gonna show you how to unpick it. So if you and whoever else is listening and sufficiently motivated, if you could just imagine a clock face, and at the 12 o'clock face write a B, and then at 3 o'clock write an E, and then at the 6 o'clock write an A, and then at the 9 o'clock write an R, like bear, B-E-A-R, right? To get that, north, south, east, and west, B-E, no, north, east, never eat shredded wheat. North, east, south, and west, right? As you go around. All right, let's think about, let's think about a sales guy. Okay, so there's a salesman, and the boss says to this salesperson, hey, I need you, sales aren't so good. We need to do lots more prospecting. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to make 30 cold calls a day, as well as all the other things that you do. Let's imagine that this salesperson believed, so the B at the 12 o'clock is belief. So let's write belief. Their belief is that cold calling is a waste of time. Cold calling doesn't work. Anytime anybody cold calls them, they put the phone down in disgust and indignation, right? They believe that cold calling is completely pointless and nothing will come of it. So that's their belief. Okay. Yeah. So their belief. So that's their belief. Now draw an arrow that goes to the 3 o'clock position to the E, which is expectation. So if they believe that cold calling is a complete waste of time, what do they expect to happen when they make these 30 calls? What do they expect?
No result.
They expect that people are going to put the phone down, probably going to be rude to them, probably going to call them some name, complete strangers, mind you. But anyway, let's walk past that. They believe that it's a useless, pointless pursuit, right? So they expect this to be a complete waste of time and nothing good will come of it. Okay. Yeah. So now let's draw a line from the 3 o'clock to the 6 o'clock to the A, which is the actions. You were talking about behaviors earlier. That's really, really, really important. We take to leaders all of the time. Your actions are so loud that we can't hear what you're saying, right? So let's go to their actions. So they believe that cold calling is a complete waste of time. They expect nothing good to happen. So what will their actions be? How will they dial, and what will their attitude be like? What will their tonality be like? It'll be dreadful, right? So their actions will be poor, correct? So their actions will be poor. Well, if their actions are poor, now let's draw a line to the R, which is the results. How will the results be? The results will be bad. It'll be useless. And then the results will go back into that behavior as a back into that belief as a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think it's going to be dreadful, it is.
Vicious circle, and there's literally the vicious circle.
Exactly. And Henry Ford says, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. Okay. So we have leaders who have a set of beliefs that they weren't born with, they weren't handed out by God, and you just happen to have the poor ones, right? And some other, well, all the successful people had the good ones. So we have these bunch of beliefs. We have these comfort zones. We have a very delicate ego. We have all of this negative self-talk, which we have developed, like nobody shoved them down our throat. We have a set of confirmation biases, which we will throw people under the bus for, even though we've only held them for 8 minutes, right? We've got no self-awareness. No one's telling us the truth. I mean, it's a mess. I'll give you one more problem, and then I'll tell you how to fix it all. Right? So the other problem is, so we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, and we're going to talk about self-awareness. We're going to talk about all of that stuff. But before we do that, let's just do one more scenario, which kind of captures everything. Let's see. So my favorite team. So so soccer. Do Australians call soccer football?
Well, we call it both football and soccer.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of poms in Australia, so we've.
Okay. Well, in England, where I am today, we call it football, but in America, we call it soccer. But anyway, okay. So soccer, football. Let's imagine there's two coaches. Let's imagine that there is a coach who, for my team is Manchester City. We're fortunate we have the best coach in the world, who's a chap called Pep Guardiola. But anyway, let's not think about Pep Guardiola. Let's go the opposite way, and let's think of this really dreadful, right, head coach, leader of a team, and he's lost the last 6 games. So he's 0-6. He's won none, and he's lost 6. And the owner of the team comes to see him and says, "Hey, Bob, I just want to be super clear about something. The next game you lose, you're out of here. You're fired. Don't come to work on Monday morning, right? If you lose on Saturday, because this no longer your office, you're fired." And the coach goes, "Well, hold on a minute. We've got a 3-year contract. I brought my wife and family here. The kids are at school. They love it. You can't do this to me." And the guy goes, "I don't give a flying fig," right? "The next game you lose, you are out of here." And he believes him, right? So he knows it's serious, right? So he then goes back to his coaches and he says, "Guys, who are we playing on Saturday? We're playing Brighton. Okay, guys, I want to be really clear. If we lose that game on Saturday, every one of you is for the chop, right? Every one of you. I'm going to lose my job, and I'm taking you guys with me. You're all going to lose your job. If we lose against Brighton on Saturday, don't come into work on Monday because you haven't got a job," right? Do you remember those executive toys, the Newton's cradle with all those little balls where you lift up one ball and you let go and it comes down and it's the other one, right? This guy's just done that. He's just been told one thing and he's just passed it on to his team, right? Immediately, right? Almost word for word. If we lose against Brighton, we're all out of a job. How do you think that head coach and all of the other coaches are now setting up for Brighton on Saturday? They are telling their guys, don't anyone makes a mistake, they're dead. Don't come to work on Monday because you won't have a position, you won't play in this team ever again. They're getting their biggest guys. They're saying, don't lose the ball. If we don't lose the ball, they can't score against us. And if they can't score against us, we can't lose. And if anybody loses the ball, they're dead, right? I'll substitute them. He's getting his biggest guy. What's the whole feeling now? The whole feeling is now fear.
Fear.
The whole feeling is now scarcity and lack and worry. Creativity's gone out the window. Everybody's terrified, right? And all they're doing is setting up not to lose. So this first coach is the playing not to lose. Now, you were talking about self-sabotaging behavior. So many leaders, for fear of losing, they play not to lose. Now,
As
when you
opposed to win, yeah.
right, when you set everything up to play to not to lose, here's what happens. Everybody has this fear and scarcity, and everybody creativity's gone and all of that kind of stuff. And you'll be staggered how many times you see that in the boardroom. Okay, so it's 5 minutes. So all week they've been playing defend, 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 right? Don't let them score. If they score, if they don't score, we can't lose, right? So don't let them score. So it's 5 minutes before the game starts, and the coach says, guys, kill them, right? Don't anybody make, just do exactly what we've been telling you to do. If you lose the ball, get it back. If anybody makes a mistake, they're dead, right? And everybody's terrified. Okay. It's now half time. There's only one of three positions that are either by some miracle winning, or they're drawing, or they're losing. That's it. I was going to say it's binary, but that's two. There's only one of three positions that could be, they're either winning, they're drawing, or they're losing. Let's imagine then that they're winning. Does the guy say, hey guys, we're winning, relax, enjoy yourself? No, he says, keep doing exactly what you have been doing. Don't change a thing.
Because he's got confirmation bias.
Right. So they were defensive mindseted. By some miracle, they're winning. And now, even though they're winning, he still wants them to be even more defensive. Let's imagine they're drawing at halftime. Again, he's going to say, do exactly what we've been doing, do more of the same, work even harder. We're not losing. You're doing exactly what we said. Everything's going to plan. Do more of that. Now let's go back to the other coach, the guy that's playing to win. The guy that's playing to win, right, has a completely different outlook. He's like, he genuinely is putting his most creative people on the team. Like, enjoy yourself, have fun with it. You guys are the best. You can beat anybody. Pep Guardiola from Manchester City, right? You can just go and do anything, right? No one's smarter, no one's better than you. Building them up, right? Building them up on their identity side, on their I side, because he wants them to perform well on their role side. Now, the problem is we can only perform in our role consistent with how we see ourselves conceptually. So if you got kids and you want your kids to do well in anything, the best thing you can do is build them up how they feel about themselves, and they'll perform better in their role. But if we diminish how they feel about themselves, then their performance diminishes, right? Because we evaporate their self-belief. When we evaporate their belief, we diminish them on their identity side, then we diminish them on their role side, right? The complete opposite thing happens. Managers and leaders. Let's assume we have an average individual who does good work 60% of the time. He does some dreadful work 20% of the time, and he does some exceptional work 20% of the time. Just an average Joe, right? 20% excellent, 60%. It's a standard distribution bell chart, right? 20% in the A zone, 60% in the B zone, and 20% in the C zone. Where do most conversations happen between the leader and the individual? It's the stuff that they're unhappy with, the C zone stuff, right? It's that poor behavior or poor attitude. That's where they concentrate all of their conversations. If they spent all of the time instead of the C working on the A side, or the 20% of the stuff that they did was great, because what gets rewarded gets repeated, right? Much better things would happen. Anyway, back to the coach. So it's 5 minutes before the game. And this is the guy that's playing to win. He's like, enjoy yourself. You've got it. You'll kill these guys. You'll batter them. Just have fun with it. And everything that we've done. And I believe in you and all of that stuff. Okay. It's now half time. They're either winning, losing, or drawing. Let's imagine they're winning. Does he say, okay, guys, time out. Now we need to pump the brakes, step back. Let's defend like crazy. No, he says annihilate them. Let's make it a record win. Let's one for the history books. Let's embarrass them. Let's stomp them into the ground. So if he's playing to win and he's winning, it makes him be more that. Let's say he's playing to win and he's drawing. He's going to say, guys, let's work a little bit harder. We can do it, right? He wants them to be more of that. And if they're losing, he wants them to be more of that. In other words, if you have a positive mindset, anything that happens to you reinforces that positivity. If you have a poor mindset, like the bear, right, that model that you drew before, and you have a poor belief, poor mindset, anything that happens to you reinforces that, right? It's interesting. So
People will go into avoidance unless they're accountable for that. They will, if this is their pattern, they will go into avoidance, and because it's uncomfortable, and we need to get more comfortable with being uncomfortable, but this is an uncomfortable thing to do. So it's really easy to go back into all that negative behavior in terms of, I'm just going to avoid it or find excuses for not doing it.
Exactly.
Well,
And also, too, I just want to know, before we keep going on this, because we're just about running out of time.
Yeah.
Who won the game? Who won the game?
City won the game. He always win the game.
Did they win the game? Did he win the game?
Yeah.
So the negative,
Oh, now I got you. The guy that was playing not to lose, lost the game.
He lost the game. Okay, so that becomes because I wondered, because I thought, well, I mean, when you're putting fear into someone's and so many people that I guess
they make bad decisions. They make decisions based on scarcity. They become very risk averse. Yeah, it's.
So he lost. So he lost his job.
He did. Yeah, he
lost
did.
his job. And I guess that would have been a lesson for him, hopefully, and also the whole team, about playing to win.
I wonder, unless you reflect, I wonder, some people just go through life, and unless they're prepared to do the work, Antonio's right. You've got to do the work, and you've got to reflect, and you've got to put yourself in an uncomfortable space and lean into that uncomfortable stuff. Otherwise, you'll keep making the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. Groundhog Day, and bemoaning the fact that everybody else is succeeding and you're not, right? It's people are bonkers.
Why is life so unkind to me?
I know.
Well, if you don't learn from your mistakes, you've just missed an opportunity.
I used to have a boss. I think I'll finish kind of on this point. That he would say to me, and it's a rather grisly thing to say, so it's quite grim, and it might drive the point home, perhaps. So he would say to me, what have you learned in the last few days, Antonio? And if I'd say, oh, not much really, Andy, he would say, that's a shame, because unless you've amassed some great personal wealth within the last 24 hours, the only advantage you have today over yesterday is what you've learned, because otherwise you're just a day closer to debt, right? And he was right. So we have to be very, very intentional about trying to grow and develop ourselves, develop our people, develop our business. And if we have that mentality, that some you win and some you learn, success equals failure plus persistence, right? So long as we have that, give yourself permission to fail, to slip up occasionally, get an accountability partner, start journaling, build up your self-awareness and build up your self-development. Because if you don't, it's just new day, same old stuff. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I remember what sort of a different way that people would self-sabotage themselves when these companies would have these massive redundancies. They would have people would say to me, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be made redundant. I'm just going to go in there. I'm going to be quiet, not say anything, and just head down. And hopefully they won't make me redundant.
Not lose.
And I used to say, that's right, playing not to lose. And I used to say to them, that's the wrong strategy. At the end of the day, they're making people redundant and restructuring for a reason because things aren't happening. And the people that they want are the people with ideas and opinions. And this is the time to speak up.
Exactly. To play to win. Love it. Great.
Play to win. And hey, listen, on that note, we're all playing to win, aren't we?
Let's get out there and win some games.
Win some games. Listen, Antonio, thank you so much for joining us all the way from the UK. We really appreciate your words of wisdom. And we hope that everybody out there has learned a few things about going forward and not self-sabotaging themselves and having belief in themselves, and and be prepared to fail because you're going to learn. So thanks so much. We really appreciate it. Great conversation. Thanks, Krystyna.
Thank you.
For more information about Every Step and our guests, head to everysteppodcast.com. To be notified of new podcasts, please subscribe via your favourite listening platform. And of course, follow us on social media and direct message us to share your ideas about guests or topics.